$80 for a game is too much? Capcom's president says games should cost even more, claiming development costs are now 100 times higher than in the NES era. For context, the average AAA game budget now tops $200 million, yet games like Monster Hunter Wilds still launched at $70. So why the sudden push for $80? Are we really just seeing the effects of inflation? Microsoft and Nintendo have already set $80 as the new normal for their major titles, and some analysts predict $100 games might not be far off. We're asking, are we paying for real cost increases or for ever higher profit targets? Let's look at what's actually happening as $80 becomes the new baseline. The shift to $80 games isn't just a headline, it's already here, and it's changing how people buy and play. Over the past year, major publishers have started rolling out higher price tags. Microsoft is raising its first-party games to $80 later in the year, and Nintendo charges $80 for Mario Kart World. Obsidian's The Outer Wilds 2, launching on October 29, 2025, will also debut at $80 on both PC and Xbox, but it'll be available day one on Game Pass, showing how publishers are balancing higher box prices with subscription alternatives. Gamers aren't all reacting the same way. Some see the price hike as unavoidable, while others feel shut out. Analyst Matt Puscatella notes that deluxe and collector's editions have already pushed prices over $80, sometimes up to $100, and 23% of gamers in a recent survey said they're willing to pay more if they see extra value, but there's still a clear difference between choosing a premium edition and being forced to pay more for the base game. Nintendo says this $80 price isn't a new standard for every title. Doug Bowser, Nintendo of America's president, explains that they determine the suggested retail price of any Nintendo product on a case-by-case basis, which means some games could still launch at lower prices, but the doors open for higher ones. At the same time, the Xbox Series X console now costs $600, $100 higher than before, which nudges more players towards subscription services like Game Pass as a way to avoid high upfront costs. It's not clear yet if $80 will stick. Some analysts think only massive releases can pull it off. There's talk that GTA 6 could test a $100 price, while smaller AAA games may struggle to convince buyers. Publishers are counting on launch day hype and FOMO, hoping demand will outweigh price concerns. Rise Elliott from Media points out that $100 collector's editions are already common, so higher base prices might just feel like the next step. How gamers respond now will set the tone for future pricing. If $80 games keep selling, publishers will see it as a green light. But if players hold off or wait for discounts, companies might have to adjust. With Mario Kart World and The Outer Worlds 2 as the test cases, the industry is watching closely to see if this price point becomes the new standard or a lesson in pushing too far. But what's actually driving these prices up? Development costs didn't suddenly skyrocket for no reason. To figure out what's changed, let's break down what it takes to make a modern AAA game. AAA game budgets are now reaching levels that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. The UK Competition and Markets Authority reports average AAA budgets have topped $200 million, up from $50 to $150 million just 5 years ago. GTA 6's rumored $2 billion budget, if accurate, would make it the most expensive game ever made, surpassing even the biggest Hollywood films. These rising costs are driven by more than just bigger teams. Studios face expensive development tools, advanced technologies, and higher costs of living, especially in the US and UK, all of which add up quickly. Most of these budgets don't even include marketing, which can push the total even higher. For a major release like Call of Duty, worldwide promotions can bring the total spend close to $300 million. Publishers break down the main expenses into a few key areas. First, hyper-realistic graphics need large art teams. The Last of Us Part 2, for example, had over 100 animators just for facial expressions. Second, building open worlds requires hundreds or even thousands of developers across multiple studios. Third, voice acting and motion capture, especially when using celebrity talent, add millions to the bill. Finally, live service models mean teams keep working for years after launch, creating new content and updates. Capcom's president Haruhiro Tsujimoto points out that development costs are about 100 times higher than during the NES era. In the 1980s, a single programmer and artist could make a full game. Now, A modern Resident Evil or Street Fighter needs hundreds of people working for years. Tsujimoto argues that even with these costs, game prices haven't kept up with inflation. $60 in 2005 is about $90 today, yet only now are we seeing $80 base prices in the US. Where a studio is located also changes the math. US developers pay $120 to $150 per hour, while UK rates are $80 to $100. Outsourcing to countries like India, where rates can be as low as $30 to $60 per hour, helps control costs. But most creative work stays in the highest cost regions. This puts pressure on studios to keep up with rising salaries, especially as tech companies compete for the same talent. The big question is whether all this spending actually makes games better or just more expensive. Some features like advanced graphics or massive open worlds add clear value, but not every game needs a Hollywood cast or a 100-hour campaign. Even publishers have debated internally if these huge budgets make sense, especially when some mid-sized games with leaner budgets outperform $200 million blockbusters. For players, it all comes down to whether the higher price matches the value they get. And that's where the real debate starts. For a lot of players, the real question is whether the new $80 price tag actually makes sense in their own budgets. The jump from $70 to $80 is a 14% increase, and publishers say it's about covering higher costs and inflation. But for many gamers, wages haven't kept up. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, $80 is about 11 hours of work at the current US federal minimum wage. That's a real stretch, especially when you consider that in 2005, $60 was about 7 hours at minimum wage. Even looking at the 2023 US median household income of $80,000, if people spent the same percentage of their income on games as in 2006, a $100 price tag technically wouldn't break that ratio. Still, most people feel the pinch when the upfront price increases. Publishers like Take-Two argue that games offer great value for the money, especially if you look at the price per hour. Their CEO says that per hour value times the number of expected hours makes games a solid deal. Some players do see it that way. $80 for a game that lasts 100 hours can seem fair compared to 8 movie tickets or 4 months of Netflix. But that logic doesn't work for everyone. Not every game is a massive RPG, and not every hour is equally fun. Street Fighter 6, for example, launched at $60 with a ton of replay value, but rumors say its sequel could be $80 without any promise of 33% more content. Shuhei Yoshida, former PlayStation Studios boss, points out that if you adjust for inflation, $60 games from the 90s actually line up with today's $80 price. But he also notes that this argument misses factors like lower distribution costs and the rise of post-launch monetization. Value isn't just about playtime or inflation, it's also about what's actually in the box. Nintendo's Super Mario Bros. Wonder is a $60 game with less than 20 hours of play, but fans rarely complain because the quality is high. On the other hand, some big budget games charge $80 and still push expensive season passes and DLC. Economic pressure is changing how people buy games. With the cost of living up and wages mostly flat, most players wait for sales or turn to services like Game Pass, which offer a library of games for a monthly fee. Free-to-play games like Fortnite are another alternative, especially for those who can't justify $80 upfront. If enough players hold back, publishers might rethink their strategies. If not, $100 games could be on the horizon. Of course, the sticker price isn't the whole story. Even after paying $80, players often find the game still pushes them to spend more. Microtransactions have become the real engine behind the modern gaming industry, even when players are already paying $80 upfront. Take-Two Interactive reported that in the first quarter of 2025, 77% of its revenue came from microtransactions. This isn't just from free-to-play games. Full-price AAA releases are also built around in-game purchases. When publishers say higher base prices are about offsetting development costs, it's hard to ignore that most of their money now comes from after the initial sale. The scale of microtransactions is hard to overstate. Newzoo found that in 2024, PC gamers spent 58% of their total gaming budgets on in-game purchases, not on the games themselves. That shift is visible in titles like NBA 2K, which offers a $150 Ultimate Edition packed with virtual currency, and yet players still end up buying more currency, cosmetic skins, and battle passes. It's not just about cosmetics. Sometimes these purchases affect how the game plays or how quickly you can progress. The industry's reliance on these extra costs means that even after buying a game, players are nudged towards spending more. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is another example. It's a full-price release with microtransactions built in from the start. The same goes for EA Sports FC's Ultimate Team Mode, where players regularly spend money on digital card packs. Even special editions can push the limits, like the $450 Armored Core Edition, which shows just how far publishers will go to monetize devoted fans. It's now rare to find a major release without some kind of DLC or in-game store. Some people hope that higher base prices will mean fewer microtransactions, but history doesn't support that idea. When games moved from $50 to $60, microtransactions only became more common. Now, with $80 games, we're seeing more expensive deluxe editions and more aggressive live service features. Free-to-play hits like Fortnite and Genshin Impact built their business on microtransactions. But now full-priced games are copying the same tactics. Publishers aren't choosing between raising base prices or adding microtransactions. They're doing both. The rise of live service models means even single-player games often have online stores and ongoing monetization. Players are left wondering if the extra money actually adds value or just pads company profits. This situation raises another question. If big studios are charging $80 and are still adding microtransactions, what options do smaller developers have? The divide between indie and AAA games keeps getting wider as development costs for big titles soar and prices hit $80. Indie developers, often working with budgets under $10 million, sometimes closer to $1 million, focus on gameplay innovation and unique art styles instead of massive scale. Their games usually sell for $10 to $30, making them much more accessible for players who aren't ready to pay AAA prices. This split has led to two distinct markets, one chasing high-end graphics and big budgets, and the other delivering creative experiences at affordable prices. There's also a middle ground with AA games. Helldivers 2 is a good example. It was made for about $50 million, which is much less than most AAA games. But it managed to outsell several big-budget titles. AA games like this prove that you don't need to spend hundreds of millions to succeed. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 from Kepler Interactive is another recent AA release, priced at around $50. Matthew Handrahan called it one of the most memorable games of the year, showing that strong design and polish can stand out even without a blockbuster budget. These AA games offer polished visuals and deep mechanics without the steep price tag, appealing to players who want something between indie creativity and AAA spectacle. Indie games have found plenty of success by focusing on niches that AAA studios often ignore. Genres like roguelikes, deck builders, and narrative adventures are common in the indie scene because they don't require huge teams or massive budgets. Games like Palworld, which sold over 15 million copies at $30 each, show how a lower price and high replayability can attract a huge audience. Steam data points out that indie titles now make up nearly 40% of platform revenue, and in some quarters, indie revenue has even outpaced AAA. This shift is sometimes called a golden era for indie games, as more players look for value and variety outside of big studio releases. Some players still prefer the production values of AAA games and are willing to pay $80 for them, but others are moving toward indie and AA titles for affordability and fresh ideas. As prices go up, the risk is that casual players might skip AAA games entirely, leaving only the most dedicated fans. The industry is clearly splitting into different paths, and which side grows will depend on what players are willing to pay for. With all these changes, the $80 question isn't just about price, it's about what gaming becomes next. As publishers push higher prices and microtransactions, players are starting to change their habits, waiting for sales, moving to subscription services, or exploring more affordable indie games. Industry experts point out that our wallets shape the market. If enough people become selective, publishers will have to respond. Some gamers are still willing to pay $80 at launch, but many are holding off or looking for alternatives. With that said, will you buy your next AAA game at full price, wait for a sale, or use a subscription service like Game Pass? Share your answer in the comments. The era of $60 to $70 blockbusters is ending. The question is, where do you stand? If you're in the market for a great AA game, I highly suggest to take a closer look at Clair Obscur Expedition 33. To know more about the game and the impact it's had on the games industry recently, check out my previous video.